everybody, welcome to the playing field and welcome back to another episode of our first series here of our coaching focus. Delighted today to welcome another very special guest, Natalie Lawrence, who's currently joining us from level 3 over in Auckland. How are you doing, Natalie?
Good, thanks. Yeah, enjoying a little bit of extra freedom, I suppose, but without much changing, especially in the scope of football.
Yeah, it certainly sounds that way. And look, we're hoping that you're keeping busy and engaged in certainly your job and in football. For those that are listening, I first came across Natalie when we were in similar football development roles. I was in Auckland, Natalie was down in Wellington. That would have been, 2013, 14 now. But I really didn't get to know Natalie as well as I believe I do now until we went to Topor for what was then the NZF OFC B license, if you remember that one, Nat, a few years ago.
I remember it well.
And that was certainly the first time that I really started to get to know Nat a bit more and obviously see what she was capable of doing both on and off the field. So I'm really delighted that you're with us today, and I'm hopeful that you'll be able to share some of your experiences, I guess, from that point to where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. And just firstly, thanks for thinking of me and inviting me onto it. You've obviously interviewed some pretty cool people so far, so hopefully I don't let the females down.
Well, fingers crossed, and I'm sure that won't be the case. So if we do go back to that course, potentially to begin with, like I said, that was a time where I probably got to know you a little bit more and saw a lot of the capabilities that you had. At that point, what type of role were you doing? Were you exclusively coaching, or were you in a development role, or both?
Yeah, I was doing a bit of both. So I was working at Capital Football as the Women's Development Officer. But I'd also just done my first season as the National Women's League head coach role as well. So we just finished our first season. If I remember right, that course was in January or February. It was very hot.
Yeah.
So I was working within the talent acceleration program as well, as it was back then, NTCs and that kind of coaching, but as in full-time coaching, it was still very much a development focused role, looking at still growing the game and the females around the capital region, and then being able to do a bit of coaching just on top of that. And I think taking the National Women's League was, or even just before that, was the first realization of, okay, so you don't play football anymore. And the development area I loved, and the coaching I just loved even more, and realized that I need to get onto these courses. I need to start upskilling myself if I want to take this a little bit more seriously.
So you actually really enjoyed both the development and the coaching side.
Yeah, definitely.
What were some of the reasons you think you enjoyed the development side of the role at the time?
I think with it was such a new role, being kind of that cohort of women's development officers that first started, and we had a pretty cool model that we were following, and then just seeing the it was like the enthusiasm from not only the players but volunteers, parents, everyone around, especially in Wellington, seeing them just enthused by somebody wanting to take that side of the game seriously and wanting to put some work and effort into it. And within that, just putting on programs, you get to know all of the players and you get to kind of go on their journey with them. Which see some of them still playing now. Some of them have gone on to represent New Zealand, and some of them are actually giving back to the community in development roles at the moment. So we kind of see all aspects of, I suppose, the game.
Mm. And at that point, when you were doing the National Women's League for Capital Football, how did what were some of the successes of that particular season? So not necessarily when you came back, but that first time around. Given that you were obviously a bit younger, a bit more inexperienced, what were some of the good things that came out of that experience for you?
I think one of the biggest experiences I had was working alongside Wendy Henderson. So she was my assistant and she taught me invaluable things both on and off the field, and still does to this day. I'm pretty lucky to have her as one of the people that I can lean on. And then just the kind of culture we created that season. We'd had 2 seasons beforehand when Paul Gregg was taking the team that had been really successful. And we'd had a lot of changes within the squad and brought in a lot of young players and young faces, and we just wanted to do the best we could. And we ended up getting to the semi-final, which was we were pretty happy with. But also there was a big emphasis on how the Ferns wanted to play, and the how the I suppose how it was Tony and Aaron at the time, how they wanted teams to play, and we got a decent amount of praise um, from Aaron in particular on how we were trying to play the game. So we took a lot of um, yeah, we took a lot from that. And whilst we didn't get to the final or we didn't win, um, we felt we had successes in other areas for sure.
Mm. And certainly keen to kind of revisit, obviously, the second period at Capital and the National League later on as well. But I mean, it seems to be quite a consistent theme in some of the people that we've spoken to so far, in that they get going with these roles, whether it be in development or in coaching, and there becomes a point where either through circumstances or feeling, people choose to obviously move on from those. I mean, you eventually did move on from Capital that first time round. Can you explain a little bit to listeners, where you went to and what factored into making your decision to leave what, again, sounded like quite a cool project to be involved in?
Yeah, I think I just got an opportunity where the old women's development manager for New Zealand football, Emma Humphreys, who we became very good friends, as I did with Bev Priestman. They'd moved to Canada. Bev was working with Canada Soccer, and Emma had recently got a pretty cool role with the Vancouver Whitecaps. And we'd always talked about like, if Emma needed an assistant, make sure you give me a call. And it was all kind of in jest. I was always very happy in New Zealand. Um, but having that kind of that that taste of what felt like more full-time coaching, being in a league, um, made me doing the B license and putting the effort and time into doing that course, because that was an intense course at the time. Um, then Emma got promoted within the Whitecaps and did need an assistant, and the opportunity to try something a little bit different and to work full time in a program that was developed to create international players. So working with a real high caliber of players was just something that I felt in my kind of where I was in my career. I could have stayed development, or I could have moved and taken coaching again and try to hit another level with my coaching. That opportunity in Canada was just too good to 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 miss. So yeah, it kind of all started there, really.
Mm. And did you get the opportunity, I guess, similar to our previous guest, Lee Padmore, he spoke about how he was able to coach, every single day. Was that pretty similar to you? What did your program typically look like over the course of, say, a month or a year?
Yeah, so I was involved in two aspects of programs. So the main one was the Regional Excel Centre. So that was a full-time program. We would train 4 times a week, and we would have a game once a week. Um, the program evolved throughout the years while we were there, where we were initially training during the evenings and weekends, and that evolved to the girls all being put into the same school. It evolved to include players from outside of the region, where we could then train during the day. So we managed to train between 2:30 and 4:30 and play on a Tuesday evening against boys teams in what would be their kind of high performance boys league. So we, I was coaching 5 days a week, and in conjunction with that was the kind of skills academy, they called it, where was a it wasn't a program that players were invited to; they could just join, and I ran that program, um, getting coaches to come and deliver on it. And that would be a full day's kind of coaching, but I was more, I suppose, an overseer and just making sure everyone was okay. And I'd jump in and out of sessions. And from there, younger teams were kind of picked to then be part of some summer tournaments. So there were kind of two big aspects of my role while I was there.
Mm. And that experience, that of obviously being in a professional club in a new country that, clearly from the outside seems as if it was putting a lot of resourcing into development programs. What did that give to you personally? Kind of what benefits did you get from, being in that environment as a coach, as a leader, as a person?
Mm. I think the biggest thing is when you're working with international players every single day, you have to get better. And I don't think there's been a period of time, probably that first year of my time in Canada would be the most development I've ever done as a person and a coach. And you have to be on your game, you have to be researching, you have to be helping these players because they had pretty big goals that they wanted to achieve, both us as a program, Canada Soccer as a national body, and then the individual players as well. So just the like that level of growth, um, I look back at that and it was just like pretty much shaped everything. Without that, doing things like the A license or the job I'm in now would feel much further away.
Mm. And and similar to what you mentioned earlier around obviously Aaron McFarlane and Tony Redding's interest in what you're doing at Capital, was there much interest from, say, Canada Soccer in what you were doing at the Vancouver Whitecaps? Was there much interaction between the coaches or discussions? And if so, what did those types of conversations typically look like?
Yeah, we had a lot. Bev was the lead of the whole program for Canada Soccer, so we had a big. Um, we obviously were in constant contact with her, but Canada Soccer were um, really involved in the program, so they would provide the curriculum for us. Um, and by that I mean there was certain um, aspects of a player that they wanted us to really enhance, both in and out of possession and in transition. So we would come up with sessions, but in line with a curriculum, and have certain parameters that the players would need to hit to stay on track and to be able to stay within the program. We also, a lot of the players would get picked from the centres to represent the national teams in 17s and 20s. So we had a lot of dealings with. So Bev was the 17s head coach when I first got there, and Danny Worthington was the 20s, and then Bev ended up doing both. Um, so we would have a lot of interactions with the national team staff. We were also really lucky that most of the staff were based in Vancouver. So the opportunity to actually watch John deliver sessions to the senior team, um, like we used to be able to do that quite a lot. He was always very open to us doing that. So again, that aspect of seeing somebody that is it's got 2 bronze medals at the Olympics, seeing them work was again pretty invaluable.
Mhm. And again, there's obviously a point where that period of time comes to a close. You were there for a number of years. Wellington comes calling again. Again, was that a deliberate a choice for you professionally in terms of wanting to come back to New Zealand? And again, what would be some of your thoughts around why you would again choose from going from a professional club back into the Wellington football environment?
Yeah, it's a good question. Um, I think I've moved around a lot in my time. Obviously, clearly not from New Zealand, um, but I've never moved to a country and instantly thought that this is home. And so moving to Canada and moving to Vancouver, which is one of the most beautiful places in the world, is incredible with some amazing people. Um, I always missed New Zealand. I always kept in contact with everyone. I came back and did my A license here whilst I was still in Canada. Um, and I'd kind of achieved a lot whilst I was there. And I'd got to a stage again, I suppose similar to when I was here the first time. Do I continue down the development route or do I go into coaching? I'd kind of got to the stage where it was I can continue doing the coaching that I am, or maybe now's a good time for me to actually take a team and start to put a bit of spin on my own philosophy rather than someone else's, while still working in a really good environment with really good players. Um, what I didn't want to do was lose kind of the coaching eye that I'd got and working with um, some very fast, strong, physical, technically proficient international players. So that kind of opportunity to one come back to a place that I consider um, one of my homes now and work with a good boy side was one that kind of came at a really really good time for
Mm.
me professionally and personally.
So again, you kind of came full circle, if you like, and went back into a dual development role and coaching role. Which of those, when you were coming back, were you without necessarily putting one above the other? Which one really excited you to get back stuck into? Is it coaching in the National Youth League or coaching, or sorry, the development manager assistant role at Capital Football?
I think both of them offered something different. I think the coaching role excited me because one, it was working with um, males, which I think females should do more of. And I had such a fantastic experience with them, and it taught me a great deal um, about, yeah, just managing different people. But then looking at the development side, that was more of a managerial role. So being, I suppose, a little bit more involved in some of the um, some of the decisions being made, some of the programs being delivered, um, working more closely with the football development officers in different aspects of their work. So that just gave me a completely different string to my bow, on that I'll still getting my coaching fix at a really good standard and good level, but I was also developing myself as somebody that can be seen as more of a leader as well.
Mm. And with the experience in the National Youth League, obviously that is very closely linked to the Team Wellington men's first team. Were there much interactions between yourself and the Team Wellington men's first team at the time, or were they two kind of separate teams?
Now we had a lot of interaction. We did train at different venues, but I have a pretty good relationship with Scotty and Jose anyway, and they would invite me to attend training sessions when I could, and we would have some of the players from the youth league team train with them that were doing well. We had our captain of the youth league team at the time go to the Club World Cup with them. So there was a really strong link between the two. We followed, whilst I could bring in a bit of my own philosophy, um, we still followed kind of what Team Wellington stood for, and that aligned. Both of us aligned really well together.
Mm.
Um, so it kind of worked that they trusted me enough to do what I needed to do, but I had them there whenever I needed them. So there was a couple of games I asked them to come and sit on the bench with me. There were some training sessions I asked them to deliver so I could see them in action as well. So it was a really good collaboration between us.
Mm. Would you do it again?
The boys,
Yeah,
yeah, I think so. Yeah, different, different. Not right now, no,
yeah.
because I am kind of where I want to be now.
Mm.
But in the future, I think it's an area that, um, as a female, we shouldn't be frightened of going into.
Mm.
The respect that the boys gave to me throughout the whole time, um, even to the point where, for the majority of last year in the winter season, I was working with a men's central league side, and again, the respect that the men would give to me um, was huge. You do feel you have to prove yourself in a way, but um, yeah, I never felt that I was out of my depth or not wanted ever. And it's definitely an avenue that should be considered for more of us females in the coaching world, I think.
Yeah, and rightly so. And you mentioned obviously you're happy where you are now. Again, give the listeners an idea of, I guess, your current role that's involved another move up to obviously Auckland. What type of involvement do you have now at a national level?
Yeah, so it turns out I just like to move all the time. Uh, so started here in January, working with the Future Firms domestic program, so assisting Gemma Lewis with that. I was her assistant with the under 20s from last August. So we went to Rarotonga to qualify for the World Cup, which will hopefully take place at some stage in Costa Rica and Panama. And then part of my role is also some female coach development as well. So I was involved in the most recent B license that was held in February, and I'll be doing some more work with females around the country. That's kind of being developed at the moment, kind of how that will look. But I suppose my main kind of business as usual day to day role right now is with the FFDP and assisting Gemma with that.
So you mentioned obviously when you were back at the Whitecaps, there was obviously quite a large involvement with, or interest certainly in the national body and the clubs. In the context of New Zealand football, that's typically obviously federations. What are some of the things that you've, I guess, transferred or brought forward from your experiences of dealing with the national body there that you think will really help to nourish both the clubs and the federations, and certainly in the women's game that you're working in now?
Um, yeah, another good question. I think it's a really hard one because I think where we get stuck is sometimes we try and completely shadow what is happening in the boys and men's game into the women's game, and it's different. If you look at Canada, um, there is various MLS sides, so they've got the three MLS sides and academies within those MLS sides. If you look at the women's game, they had the regional Excel centres. So they had at the time two kind of what they called super centres, and then they brought in Ontario. So they had the three. So that kind of looks similar to the boys. But if you looked at the boys model, they would have under 10s up to say under 21s. Whereas in the girls model, you'd have maybe an under 15s and an under 18 side. So whilst it may look similar, the age groups are very different. And I think and for there they've got very similar male to female numbers also.
Mm.
Whereas here, when there's still a big disparity in men's and female numbers, um, that we can't just look at what the men are doing or what the boys are doing and think that that's gonna work for the girls.
Mm.
So I think being really open to ideas with what's the best for the females in clubs and in regions, whether that's a centralized girls program, whether that's girls playing with boys, whether that's girls only teams. Um, I think that's a discussion that still probably needs
Mm.
and should be being had.
And from your time, obviously involved in the FFDP at the moment, which is mostly obviously a centralised model, what are some of the benefits that you're seeing with the players, knowing that a majority of your wider designated players can all train together consistently?
Yeah, I think it's just having that one environment for them all. I think we all know the landscape here that is the best players get pulled a little bit from pillar to post, and then a lot of loading issues and injuries come about that. So what we've been able to do, and it's had to be done differently now because of COVID, but is really um, put together a calendar that is going to put the players in the best possible opportunity to achieve what they want to achieve. So physically, we can make sure that they're physically developing throughout the year. So we're not just plateauing. There's going to be peaks and troughs of where they physically need to be. Um, Technically, we can work on their IPP. We're not working towards a specific, say, game model. So we can work a lot on the girls' IPP and position specific trainings within different formations or within different styles of play. We can set up to play against a team to defend deep and counter attack or press high or try and have control possession. Um, so we can really dictate what development we need the players to have at those specific moments, whilst ensuring that they're eating well, they're feeling good within themselves, they're getting support, kind of that on and off the field support as
Mm.
well.
And you obviously mentioned that a lot of the players, do have to come into a central area. What type of things, and it might not necessarily be just related to your program, but what type of things can coaches do with players that are in more remote areas or rural areas? Like, what are some of the ways in which you're staying connected with, some of those players that aren't necessarily in the centralized program, but are still on the radar?
Yeah, and I think a lot of those players are pretty proactive as well at keeping in touch either with the staff here or their local staff. Like if you look at what happens at mainland, they've got a really good program, but they've obviously got players that live in Nelson or not just in Christchurch, so they've got a really good relationship with the staff down there to ensure that they're still being monitored and coming in for yeah, like windows and periods of time that is they're able to. I think that this period of time that we're in now with working from home and staying in our bubbles has probably made people realize that it's easier to connect with those outside of our immediate region than we maybe previously thought. We've all had to be pretty creative with how we're keeping our players engaged and active so that we don't, one, lose the gains that we've made since the beginning of the year, but two, we're continuing to support the players in how they need, again, on the field with their technical and physical work, but also making sure they're mentally coping throughout this time. So I think, if anything, now we've managed to get a pretty good model on how you can continue to engage with players even though you're not necessarily seeing them every day.
Mhm. And what are you doing in terms of your obviously continued education development? Obviously, you mentioned you've got to try and keep ahead of the research and the practical elements of it all. What are some of the things that you are doing to be a better coach in this time?
Yeah, so I've actually just started a master's. I started in September that I'm doing distance with the University of South Wales, and it's a master's in advanced performance football coaching. So I'm doing that on a part-time basis over 2 years. So I've just I've nearly finished year one. It's been a big steep learning curve, but as a yeah a program, it's fantastic, and I've already learned so much of it. The modules I've done this year has been periodization, effective coaching, and psychology. So some real huge areas that as a on-field coach, other than the effective coaching part, you may not actually put a huge amount of thought into, um, and really doing the masters just to get another little string to my bow on a bit more of academic research into why we do things, to help set me up should there ever be opportunities where I'm either leading a program or helping the program that I'm currently in, and helping Gemma and New Zealand football with the FFDP and any extra things we can kind of be doing. And then on a very informal basis, I obviously keep in contact with Emma and Bev a lot with what's happening over in England, and keep in contact with the staff from Canada, and some of the Canada soccer staff there. So especially during this time, we're doing a lot of sharing of ideas. So yeah, that kind of informal catch ups as well as is always quite valuable.
Well, yeah, we certainly hope that you obviously stay in this current role for long enough to see the fruits of some of those studies. And again, I'm sure that with the value that you can bring, obviously, that will be something that will eventuate as soon as we're allowed, obviously, back out on the grass again.
Yes, hopefully soon.
And I just want to extend a thanks to you, Natalie, for giving up some of your time today. As mentioned, from when we first probably got to know each other properly a number of years ago, I've certainly been hugely impressed by your commitment to extend yourself, to be better, to obviously seek out a number of environments. And I'm certainly not surprised to hear the progress that you've made, both as a coach in development roles and obviously extending now in the national body. So I'm sure there's a lot more to come. But yeah, I think from your journey so far, there's been some really cool messages which hopefully our listeners can integrate into their coaching practice. So thank you again for joining us.
No, thank you for inviting me. Much appreciated.
No problem. And for all of our listeners, again, make sure that you certainly like, subscribe, feedback on these episodes. And again, if there's any questions that you've got for Natalie for next time, then hopefully we'll have an opportunity to answer those. But otherwise, thank you for joining in, and we'll see you again on the side of the playing field. Thank you.